Have you ever realized that some stories cannot be told lightly because they were written with tears, carved into the skin, and still echo as scars in the soul? That's the kind of story I'm about to open my heart and share with you now. It's not fiction, it's not made up. It's real life marked by pain, silence, impossible choices, and finally, by something that can only be called a miracle. My name is Rebecca. And if I've decided to speak now, it's because silence almost destroyed me. For years, I hid the wounds I carried inside my home, while to the neighbors and to the community, my family seemed just like any other in our small American town. On the outside, we looked normal. But behind closed doors, the truth was a maze of fear and violence. I wish I could say my story began with lullabies and warm embraces. But the truth is, it began with tears. When I became a mother, I thought I had finally found the shelter my heart longed for. But instead, motherhood, which was supposed to be light, became another prison. I saw rejection mark my body and tyranny crush my dreams. Every day I wondered if I would survive, and every night I closed my eyes afraid of what the morning might bring. People thought I lived an ordinary life, but no one knew about the slamming doors, the suffocated cries, the feeling of always walking on glass, trying not to trigger the fury of the man I lived with. No one knew about the sleepless nights when I stood over a child burning with fever, begging God in silence to spare her. And in the middle of all this, poverty consumed us. I learned how to turn almost nothing into something, to divide the last piece of bread between two small mouths, smiling to hide the hunger twisting inside me. It was in this setting that I faced the most unbearable pain of my life, the death of my child, whom I buried with my bare hands with no coffin. No flowers, just cold earth covering the body I loved most. But before you turn away thinking this is only a story of sorrow, let me tell you, it isn't. This is also a story of promise, of escape, of courage and rebuilding. Because in the same soil where I shed tears, a seed of faith was planted. In the moment I thought everything had ended, something inside me rose up and whispered, "No, this is not the end, and that's why I need you to stay with me until the end." Every part of this confession is like a mirror. Maybe you've known the weight of a broken home. Maybe you've tasted the silence of violence. Maybe you've carried secrets too heavy for anyone else to see. Maybe you think there's no way out, that your story is already sealed. I thought that too. But today I'm here to witness that there is a way out. There's a new life. There is victory. What I'm going to share is raw, intimate, real. It speaks of motherhood marked by pain, of poverty, of a daughter bargained away like property, of a night of escape, and of love that finally showed me the impossible is possible. But above all, it is a story about faith. Faith that held me up when my own strength was gone. So take a deep breath, walk with me through these pages, and prepare yourself. Because after hearing what I have to say, you'll never look at prayer, courage, or the strength of a mother the same way again. When I found out I was pregnant with my first daughter, I thought I had finally found shelter. I believed that holding a baby in my arms would be enough to turn the harshness of life into something softer. In my imagination, motherhood came with the smell of clean blankets, soft music, and a home where peace reigned. But the reality I lived was very different. At that time, I lived in a small town in the American Midwest, surrounded by wooden houses with white fences, where everyone knew everyone. From the outside, my life looked normal. I had a husband, Michael, and a family that, to anyone watching from a distance, looked just like any other household on the block. But inside our walls, the truth was a maze of pain. Michael didn't see pregnancy the way I did. For me, it was hope. For him, it was wait, another mouth to feed, another problem to solve. He never looked at my belly with tenderness, never spoke of the future with excitement. His silence was colder than any winter, and his words cut deeper than any scream. When Sarah was born, my first daughter, I was exhausted but filled with a love I had never felt before. I looked at that tiny being, with her eyes still shut and her fragile cry, and thought, maybe now everything will change. But it didn't. Michael didn't welcome her with joy. To him, Sarah was a burden, not a blessing. That was when I realized that my motherhood would not be built on lullabies and tender embraces. It would be marked by rejection, by poverty, and by fear. I learned early on that silence was my ally, because even a baby's cry could ignite the fury of the man I lived with. The days were long, but the nights were worse. I stayed awake for hours, staring at Sarah, wondering if I could protect her from everything around us. The little money we had barely filled the pantry. Many nights, my dinner was simply what was left on her plate. I didn't mind. But watching my daughter grow up hungry was a wound that consumed me. It was in this setting that my second daughter came. Emily, a delicate girl who seemed to carry survival in her tiny lungs from the start. Emily was born fragile, and from the very first days, fever became our unwelcome guest. I spent entire nights sitting by her makeshift crib, pressing cold cloths to her forehead, begging God in whispers to give her strength. Meanwhile, Michael remained indifferent. He came and went as if nothing was happening. His concerns weren't the children, but his bruised pride, the alcohol that consumed him, and the authority he wanted to impose on us. Some days, I feared his silence even more than his rage. Sarah, still so young, learned too quickly what survival meant. She knew when to hide, when to remain silent. I saw in her eyes a stolen childhood, marked by slamming doors, flying plates, and looks sharper than knives. I tried to shield her, but how can you protect a child when you can't even protect yourself? Motherhood, which I thought would give me strength, seemed to drain me instead. And yet I couldn't give up. Every timid smile from Sarah, every fragile breath from Emily pulled me back to my feet. But guilt followed me constantly, the crushing sense that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't give them the life they deserved. Poverty made everything worse. I remember nights when there was nothing but crumbs in the cupboard. I pretended not to be hungry so my daughters could eat the little we had. Sarah would look at me and ask why I wasn't eating, and I would smile weakly, saying I was already full. Inside, I cried silently, begging God not to let my children starve. Emily, so fragile, was my biggest worry. Her weak health robbed me of rest, and each time the fever returned, I felt I was fighting a battle I could never win. I questioned whether my hands could hold her long enough against the shadow of illness, and the neglect that lingered in our home. With time, I learned that motherhood was not only about bringing life into the world, but also about fighting death every day. It meant facing rejection, fear, and violence, and still refusing to let my daughters drown with me. Deep inside, I felt a spark whispering that I had to resist. Even if everything around me screamed defeat, I didn't know then how far that spark would carry me. I couldn't imagine the tears I would still shed or the promises I would make in front of a child's grave. But even in those early days, amid Emily's muffled cries and Sarah's haunted silence, a seed of courage began to grow inside me. It was small, almost invisible. But it was there. A flame that, even against the storm of tyranny and the shadow of poverty, refused to die out. Weeks blurred together in endless nights without sleep, fevers that would not break, and prayers that seemed to vanish into the ceiling. Emily was so small, so fragile, that every breath she took felt like a battle. I sat beside her crib, cloth in hand, waiting for a miracle. The little we had left in the pantry went first to her. I went hungry often, but what mattered was that my daughters ate. Sarah noticed it all. Even as a child, she saw her sister's suffering, her father's indifference, and my desperation. She learned too soon that silence was safer than words. Michael looked at Emily as if she were nothing but a problem. His words still haunt me. "We won't get attached to a sick child." My heart shattered hearing it. How could a father refuse love to the daughter who was fighting to stay alive? I prayed constantly. God, please don't take her. Take me instead. But heaven stayed silent. Every day her fever worsened. Every night she slipped further away. Until the night came when everything stopped. I held her against my chest, her tiny body burning hot. And suddenly the heat faded. Her breathing slowed, grew shallow, and then stopped. In my arms she grew still. The warmth of life left her, and silence filled the room. I rocked her lifeless body in my arms, whispering her name as if I could call her back. Tears poured down until I thought I would drown in them. Michael appeared in the doorway, face unreadable, and coldly muttered, "At least it's one less mouth to feed." Then he walked away. That night, I buried my child with my own hands in the cold earth behind our house. My nails broke against the soil, my fingers bled, but I dug until there was space for her small body. No coffin, no flowers, just a mother and her tears, laying her child to rest in silence. And as I covered Emily with dirt, I made a vow. With trembling lips, I whispered, "Never again. No other daughter of mine will be buried alive in a marriage she didn't choose or in a house ruled by tyranny. I will protect them, no matter what it costs me. Something inside me broke that night, but something new was born too. In the emptiness, I felt the faint flicker of strength. As if Emily, even in her death, had left me a legacy, courage. From then on, Sarah became my reason to fight. Michael began to speak of her as if she were currency, planning to marry her off to the Johnson's son in exchange for money and land. My daughter, only a child, was being bartered like property. The promise I made at Emily's grave burned inside me. No, I won't let it happen. It was grief that gave me strength. The soil under my nails, the weight of her body in my arms, all of it became the fuel for a new resolve. We would escape, or we would die trying. After Emily's death, our house felt more like a tomb. Sarah moved like a ghost, clutching the pieces of her childhood as if they could protect her. Michael drank more than ever, and his words turned into iron. One night, he announced, "The Johnsons want a wife for their son Robert. They have money. Once the deal is done, our lives will be back in order." Sarah froze beside me. She was only 12, still holding ragged dolls, still asking for bedtime stories. Yet Michael spoke of her as if she were a transaction. I tried to resist. "She's just a child," I said, voice trembling. His stare cut me to pieces. "She's mine. I decide what she is." From that moment, fear filled every corner of our home. Sarah stopped speaking, stopped smiling. She sat for hours stitching a dress that felt more like a shroud than a bridal gown. Every thread she sewed tightened the invisible chains around her neck. One night, she tried to run. I caught her at the door, holding a bundle of clothes. Her eyes burned with tears and determination. "Mama, if I stay, he'll kill me inside. If I leave, maybe I'll have a chance." My heart broke, but I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Go, God be with you." Hope lasted only a few hours. By dawn, men dragged her back, red marks around her arms. Michael followed, his silence colder than steel. "In 2 weeks, you'll be his wife. No more foolishness." That night, I held Sarah in my arms while she trembled, her tears silent. I knew then there would be no wedding. I would not allow it. Rumors spread of a man named Dr. Heinrich, living beyond the bridge. Some said he was a healer, others that he kept secrets. But what mattered was that he wasn't Michael. That name became my rope of hope. On the night before the forced wedding, Michael collapsed drunk on the sofa. Sarah stood in the corner, holding her small bag. I touched her face and whispered, "It's time. Tonight, we don't go back." We moved like shadows through the house, praying the floorboards wouldn't creak. The cold bit at our skin as we stepped into the night. Every step was a prayer. Every breath was a risk. But inside me, the vow I made at Emily's grave roared louder. No more daughters buried alive. We walked toward the bridge, toward the unknown, but also toward freedom. The night of our escape is carved in my memory forever. Each step across the bridge felt like defiance against death. My heart thundered as I held Sarah's trembling hand, whispering silent prayers. "Lord, cover us. Don't let him find us." When we reached Dr. Heinrich's house, I knocked with shaking hands. He opened the door, eyes weary yet kind, and simply said, "Come in. You're safe here." For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. Sarah curled up in a corner and fell asleep without fear. I stayed awake, listening to her steady breathing. And for the first time since Emily's death, I breathed deeply too. Freedom came with judgment. The town whispered, "She left her husband. She broke tradition." Women shook their heads, men spat words like ungrateful and foolish. But I didn't care anymore. Survival was no longer shame. It was victory. We worked hard. I washed clothes, scrubbed floors, cooked for pennies. Sarah helped. We lived with little, but every coin we earned with our own hands tasted of dignity. It was then Joseph appeared. A carpenter with scarred hands and a quiet smile. Unlike other men, he didn't look at Sarah as property. He looked into her eyes with respect. He brought wood in the cold, fixed things without asking for anything. Over time, affection grew shy at first, but strong. When Joseph asked for Sarah's hand, he turned to me, but I looked at her. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Yes, Mama, this is what I want." The wedding was simple, but it was freedom. Not a bargain, Not a chain, but choice, love. Years later, I sat on the porch watching Sarah's children, my grandchildren, play in the yard. Their laughter filled the air, a sound I once thought I'd never hear. And in that moment I knew the promise made with tears and soil had blossomed into life. Our family, once defined by tyranny and despair, was now rebuilt by love and faith. It wasn't my strength that saved us. It was God's hand guiding, shielding, loving us when no one else would. If you've made it this far, you know this is more than just the story of one woman and her children. It's a testimony. Darkness tried to consume us, but God's hand lifted us. Emily's death was not the end. It was the spark of a promise that saved Sarah's life and led us to freedom. Michael thought violence could define our future, but God rewrote the ending. What was once despair became hope. What was once silence became laughter. What was once tyranny became freedom. And now, I speak directly to you. I don't know your pain, your chains, or your scars. But I know this, there is a living God, and His hand is reaching for you right now. Maybe your life has been nothing but loss, silence, and disappointment. Maybe you've thought there is no way out. I thought so too. But I discovered there is. The way out has a name, Jesus Christ. He turns mourning into dancing, shame into honor, weakness into strength. He takes stories written in pain and rewrites them with hope. I gave Him my life, and I was never the same. And today I invite you to do the same. You don't need perfect words. You don't need to clean yourself up before coming to Him. Speak to Him just as you are. Say, Lord Jesus, I give you my life. Break the chains that bind me. Free me from fear. Lift the weight off my soul. Write a new story for me. I choose to live with you and for you. That simple act of surrender has the power to change everything. And I ask you, don't walk alone. Subscribe here, join this chain of faith and testimonies. Each story shared, each message spread, could reach someone who is just one step away from giving up. Remember, no prayer is wasted. Every tear shed before God rises like incense before His throne. If He transformed my story, He can transform yours too. Today, you have a choice. Keep carrying the weight alone. Or place your life in Jesus' hands and taste true freedom. I chose Him. I was never the same again. Now it's your turn.